Good afternoon, local church. How you doing today? Ooh, that was lackluster. We are going to go again. All right, everybody ready? Take a little power breath. And good afternoon, local church. How are we doing today? Oh, honestly, you beat the last service. That was a much better even reframe, so I'm very excited. Hi, my name's Ashley, and I typically actually am in back volunteering with our kids ministry that Allie just spoke so beautifully about and Ty ran away from. I don't know if you noticed that, but we have a lot of fun. It's a little sticky, but it's very enjoyable. But sometimes they kind of let me out to hang out with the big kids here in this room for the morning, and so I am excited to bring you part 2 of our message series today. So, as you may know or may not, but I'm going to let you know anyway, we are in a series called The Power to Change. The Power to Change. And habits matter, right? That's what we're thinking about, and it's the beginning of a new year. So it's a great time to think about, what do I want to change? How do I want to change over the course of this year? And so this book was written by a pastor and leadership coach by the name of Craig Groeschel, and he has a lot of content. He has a podcast, he has several books. He also has runs a church, and so there's a lot of messages available from him online. So if you like the concepts that you're seeing here through this series and you're interested in more, there is more out there. And so we very much thank him for providing sort of the base for this particular series so that we can offer it here in our own church, in our own community, because we think it has a lot of power. Also, I know for me, and maybe for you too, I have tried to change before, right? And not done a great job, have not seen that through. And so sometimes it can feel like change is not possible and is so hard, or how do I actually do it? Or maybe I've made some changes but not been able to make others. So hopefully by the end of this series, you have a pathway forward to changing the things that you want to change. So I have titled this particular part of the series, part 2, Identity Matters. Identity Matters. So we will be thinking about this idea of identity matters throughout the time. But first, I have some audience participation, and you just did so well on the first bit. I'm very excited about the next one. All right, so first thing we want to do is ask ourselves the question, what do you do? What do you do? So we often do things, right? But sometimes we do them so fast we don't even think about them as decisions that we've made, right? Decisions that we've made to do a thing. So I'm going to present some everyday scenarios, and I want you to tell me, what do you do? So first one, what do you do when the alarm clock goes off? How many of you are sitting there looking at the alarm going, I knew you were about to go off because I am already up? One person. 2 people. Okay, good for you. It is not me. I am in category number 2. How many of you hit snooze? Snooze, yes. How many of you plan your snoozes? Yeah, you plan. And how many of you plan multiple snoozes? Okay, yes, absolutely. So I plan multiple snoozes, and sometimes if I know I still have to get up a little bit more, I need to get up sooner, then I plan so that I have 3 3-minute snoozes instead of 3 7-minute snoozes. You know what I mean? So I kind of work it all in there. All right. I had a friend also one time who said, yeah, and this has never happened to me, so if this is you, more power to you. She's like, oh yeah, I just woke up and then I was already up, so I just stayed up and I couldn't go back to sleep. I was literally never happened in my life. Please make me a snoozer. All right, so that's one scenario. Scenario number 2. What do you do in the restaurant? What do you do in the restaurant? So how many of you get to the restaurant and you're looking around and you're like, you know what? Today I'm going for the healthy choice, grilled chicken. Who's a grilled chicken eater? Ooh, 1 person. I like that. Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate you. Oh, 2 people. We got more. We got some grilled chicken. We got some grilled chicken aficionados. I will let you know you all are the first grilled chicken aficionados in our church all day. So well done you. How many of you get to the restaurant and you go, you know what? I'm already out. Let me treat myself. Let me get, the chicken parm with penne vodka. Let me get the chicken fried steak. Let me get this. Let me get that. Hamburger, steak. Yes, those things, right? Yeah, absolutely. I have to let you know that one of the things, so I very much enjoy living on Long Island, but I am not from here, and so I recently had a rite of passage moment here on Long Island, and that is that someone invited me to their house for chicken cutlets. I have never been invited to someone's house for chicken cutlets before. How many of you feel like that's weird? Everyone has chicken cutlets. No? Ooh, some of you do. Okay, so here on Long Island, I will let you know that I have never said the words chicken cutlet before as much in my life as I have since I moved here. And so when you go to a restaurant, when you go to a sub shop, when you go to a pizza place, there's always a chicken cutlet option. And so I felt like I was missing out. But a lot of people, that is like the thing that they want all the time. And I'm coming around to it, you all. I'm coming around to it, that could be my cheat meal. If I'm out somewhere, I get some chicken cutlets. And especially, I also heard there's a ritual of like a Sunday sauce situation. So if you want to invite me over, I'm just saying I'm open for invitations to come over. All right, last scenario. What do you do with your money? What do you do with your money? How many of you, before you make a purchase, you know exactly what's in your bank account? You know, you pre-tracked it, basically. You already know. Okay, ooh, good number of you. Good job. I'm a fan of you. All right, how many of you have like a good sense? You're like, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay. All right, and how many of you use the tap and pray method? I hope. Did it go through? Yep. Yeah. I think that I'm probably in the middle category, but I've definitely had some tap and pray moments before. This is a little bit of an older school example, but I was reminded of it because over the holiday, I was watching a great Christmas movie with my dad. It's called Die Hard. Debate me later. But one of the scenes in Die Hard, they show a gas station, and on that gas station, gas was 74 cents a gallon, 74 cents a gallon. And I did not drive during that time, but I did drive at a time when it was 98, 99 cents a gallon. And so I remember my like version of tap and pray was like, well, I really want to get to a friend's house, so like literally let's see what the couch cushions have to offer today. And if I came up with $3, that was enough to get a lot of places because it was 3 whole gallons of gas. I was like, yes, let's go. We're going to see what happens here. So we have these things that we do, right? We make that choice. Maybe we're making, maybe we're hitting snooze, maybe we're choosing a healthy option. It doesn't really matter what it is, but we're somehow making the choice to do that thing. The question that we often don't actually stop to ask ourselves is why? Why do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? Why did you make that healthy choice? Why did you tap and pray? Why are we doing things that we do? What's motivating that particular behavior? And there's a few reasons. So I think there's a primary reason. That's what most of the message is going to be about. But I want to kind of go over some of the sort of secondary reasons, which are all very valid, good ones, just not maybe the primary reason why you do what you do. So the first one, why you do what you do, you feel obligated to. So maybe you know what it takes to be a good mom, a good coworker, a good, pet owner in a park, right, et cetera. So you kind of feel obligated to do the thing that you are going to go ahead and do. Maybe you don't necessarily have a true desire to do it, but social mores say like, yes, we should go ahead and do that thing. I kind of feel obligated to do this based on what's going on. That's one. Good reason, no problem. Another one might be you actually want to. I think my grilled chicken people, I think you actually just like grilled chicken. Good for you. Well done. You actually want that food. That's awesome. Maybe something that you want to do is you want to set your alarm so you're awake before it. Maybe that's something that you kind of hope to do. It makes you feel better to kind of like wake up like that. All of things that you want to do. Maybe also you want to be disciplined. You want to go to the gym every day. You want to go over the homework, your kids' homework. You want to do it. Great reasons. Love that. All right, the third reason is you want to be accepted. You want to be accepted. And this is when I think in today's world, we talk about this, I think a lot more with like social media, right? That's where I hear it. Has anybody, get all the likes and do the filters. And I'm a millennial filter person, so I like it from above and I like, cute edges and all that kind of stuff. But being accepted is one of the reasons I think we can all relate to, right? Having done something that maybe wasn't the best choice, or maybe being accepted was the best choice at the time. Like, I think you can level up and also kind of go away from who you want to be with this idea of being accepted. I have just a little story from the late 1900s about my own journey with acceptance, and that has to do with this beautiful picture, but this girl right here, this is Ashley in 8th grade. This is from my 8th grade dance. Back in the day, of course, you didn't have digital pictures, right? So this was like a printed one that they put in a little keychain so you could take away. How many of you have like little mementos like this or have had them before? Yeah. I hear they're back, that people like to take them away from things now. So that's exciting. Anyway, this is me in 8th grade. That was as close as I could get in terms of a picture to this story. But me in 7th grade, about a year before this photo was taken, was having a little bit of a like, why am I doing what I'm doing moment, okay? And so I had this best friend, her name was Kelly, and Kelly was not what my parents would have called a good influence. Kelly and I had very different upbringings, it was not great. And so she had convinced me to do some like low-level things that maybe weren't great, right? But because overall I happened to be a pretty good kid, like I was doing all right. But there was like the one time I forged my parents' signature on the planetarium, permission slip and kind of went without them knowing. They got a little mad at me, but they were like, oh, we would have let you go anyway, so fine. Well, this particular trip, did not forge this signature, but we went on a field trip as a 7th grade class to the Science Center. I lived in Maryland at the time, so it's in downtown Baltimore, so it took all the 7th graders. We were wandering around, and I had done nothing that I should have done to prepare for this. So Kelly and I were hanging out, we were in the gift shop, we were looking around, and we saw these rings that were the epitome of 12-year-old 90s amazingness. And they were these beautiful little formed dragons with like jewel eyes and all that kind of stuff, right? But having done nothing to prepare, what didn't I have any? Money, right? I had no money. And so Kelly said, well, we could just take them. And I went, and then she said, come on, just do it. And I went, okay. So I took the ring, we went away, etc. We thought we got away with it. What I didn't know was that in that particular field trip, many people were perhaps having an acceptance moment, and $20,000 worth of merchandise was moved out of the gift store during the time that our 7th grade class was there, which of course caused an inquiry, right? And so the administrators figured it, like, chased everybody down, and one of the things that had happened was, just to get to that dollar amount, was those like big agate stones, it was, science, had been like moved to other parts, and those are like $5,000, like just on their own. So more people took rings than just me, but that was kind of like, we had an inquiry. So I got caught, we moved forward, etc. The important part, though, of this story is, why did I do what I did, right? Why did I do what I did? Why did Kelly inspiring me to do, saying like, go ahead and do this, why did that get to me? And it is because you do what you do because of what you think of you. You do what you do because of what you think of you. And in that moment, I thought, I don't really think I'm cool enough to be hanging out with this girl, right? And maybe doing something risky like this will put me in a category that I think I want to be in. Why do you do? Because I didn't think I was cool enough. Or I thought maybe I'm the kind of person who does this action. And so I went ahead and did that. Luckily, that was not actually true of me. And a year later, I was very successfully at the 8th grade dance, having had no further incidents of any form after this. But this idea that our identity, or what we're thinking about our own identity, informs our behavior is a connection that is pretty well established. It makes sense, right, if you think about it, but it's something we don't actually think about that often. It's very meta, right? It's hard to think about what you're thinking about what you're thinking. However, it actually shows up pretty early on in the Bible, even in the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. There's a book of wise sayings, basically, called Proverbs, and this is a collection of sayings about wisdom sort of language, like what are things you should think on if you're going to go ahead and think on something. And there are two that I want to call out that kind of make this connection for us. So the first one is, be careful how you think. Your life is shaped by your thoughts. Be careful how you think. Your life is shaped by your thoughts. The second one is, for as he thinks within himself, so he is. For as he thinks within himself, so he is. So you can see early on in the Bible even, this connection is being made, right? Which means that people throughout history have been thinking about this connection of what we're thinking about ourselves in our minds is informing what we're doing in the world and how that's showing up. And so, another kind of just summary way to say it is, we do what we do because of what we think of ourselves. We do what we do because of what we think of ourselves. So if we think of ourselves as people who need to do risky things to be cool, then we will do risky things to be cool, right? That is kind of the connection that we would make. So another way to think of this is what we think of ourselves determines our behavior. So our identity really determines our behavior and where we're going to go. And this connection is something that people are interested in, right? As we sort of already reviewed, you and I, we make decisions a million times a day. We make all kinds of decisions. So how do we make those decisions? What are the things that we really do lean on or think about as we make decisions throughout our day? This is so interesting that there's a professor at Stanford University in California. His name is James March, and he did a study trying to figure out the answer to this question: why do we do what we do? And he interviewed a lot of people, he collected a lot of data, and he came up with the identity model of decision making, and basically said that after doing all of this research, there are 3 questions that we all ask ourselves, sometimes so quickly it's just subconscious, every single time we make a decision. I don't know about you, but I read that, I was like, I definitely don't ask myself 3 questions every time I make a decision. But once I got to, once I started thinking about it, I was like, actually, maybe I do. Maybe this is really true. So these are the decision questions that he came up with. The first one is, what type of person am I? What type of person am I? That's the first thing we ask ourselves. So we somehow, in our brains, just really quickly say, what type of person am I right now? And then we evaluate the next one. What kind of situation is this? So the first one is internal, right? We're thinking about what kind of person am I? What makes me up on the inside, et cetera? What am I thinking? The next one is external. What sort of situation am I in? Where am I? Who am I with? What's happening? All that kind of thing, right? And then the third one puts it together. And so it is, what does someone like me do in a situation like this? What does someone like me do in a situation like this? And that is how we end up with our action, right? That's how we end up with our action coming on the outside of us. So maybe you might be thinking about like finances or restaurants or whatever, but if you think about the sort of momentary decisions that you make every day that you might not notice where this is happening, maybe you're a student at school and you're sitting and you can see someone else's paper, right? And so you have the opportunity to cheat off of that paper. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but somewhere in there you said, what kind of person am I? What is the situation? And what does a person like me do in that situation? Maybe you are, you are in any kind of relationship with anybody, right? It could be your mom, it could be your friend, whatever. And you have the opportunity, maybe you know something's going on for them. You have the opportunity to reach out or not. What does a person like me do in a situation like this? Do I need to do that, et cetera? Maybe, maybe not. There's not a right answer there. It's really more thinking about the fact that you do think about what kind of person you are, what's the situation, and then that informs your actions. Maybe you give someone a break because the kind of person you are is the kind of person who gives someone a break when something goes a little bit wrong. Maybe you forgive someone when they hurt your feelings because the kind of person you are is the kind of person who forgives someone when you hurt their feelings, right? So there are these things that are temptations maybe that could, if you act on it, result in a bad thing. But there are things that are just sort of normal decisions where we're still asking this series of questions every single time we go through. So just to kind of think about our emphasis, what does someone like me do in a situation like this? Someone like me do in a situation like this? And that is really where the identity matters, right? In figuring out how we might change. So I'm going to talk just for a moment, and just a little rewind to Christmas, and I want to talk for a moment about one of my favorite Christmas characters, and that is this person right here. What's his name? Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, right? Something that I love about Ebenezer Scrooge that I think that he kind of deserves more credit for is that he is who he is, right? Like, he looks like a stingy, miserly person who is not going to be a good person to be friends with. He is not inviting anybody over for chicken cutlets, right? Like, that is not happening in this man's house. However, he's clear about that, right? He knows who someone like him is, and he acts accordingly. I am someone who does not like people, and so I push people away. I am someone who likes money, and so I don't give you any of my money. Like, he's very clear about what someone like him does in a situation like this. And all iterations, no matter how cute, of Scrooge do this, right? There's many Scrooges. This is my personal favorite Scrooge McDuck, clearly. But even like, look at this snarled lip. You know what I mean? Like Scrooge McDuck, despite his cuteness, inherent cuteness, is still that miserly character, right? And you kind of know that. But what is cool about A Christmas Carol is the arc, right? The arc of the story. Because Scrooge starts here. I know who I am. This is someone like me. And he has been that way his whole life, right? Like we meet Scrooge as an old man, right? But then over the course of the story, encountering the ghosts, seeing the possibility, etc., when he comes out at the end of the story, it's not just that he does something different, right? It's that he decided through this process that his someone like me answer is different, right? His answer to that first question, what kind of person am I? He wants that answer to be a different one. So that then his answer, and what does someone like me do in a situation like this, is also different. And we see that arc play out. And that is so hopeful, right? It gives us an idea that, and this is what we're kind of getting to do today, that to change what you do, you need to change what you think of you. To change what you do, you need to change what you think of you. If you want to be a different person who is generous and who invites people for chicken cutlets and who does all the things, then you need to not be a miser and be very happy, right, with that personality that you've taken on. And it's hard because we have all of these different messages about who we are coming in from all around us, right? Like we might know who we are on the inside, but like you have someone on social media telling you who you might be. You have a commercial, you have, a friend, a parent, you have your friend Kelly in the 7th grade, whoever that person is to you, telling you who you might be. And so it can get a little bit confusing where you even want to start. The Bible gives us a little bit of grounding in this, though. So did you know that, in fact, God created you to be awesome? If you didn't, I'm here to tell you. And I want to bring you to a part in the Bible where we can see that really clearly. It's actually in the book in the Old Testament right next to Proverbs called the Psalms. It's a little poetic, right? But it is basically a way that people are talking to God or thanking God for different things. And so in the Psalms, it says this. It says, you, talking about God, this is someone talking to God, made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. Marvelous. When was the last time you looked at yourself in the mirror and said, I am marvelous? Probably not recently. One, marvelous is not a word we use very often, but two, it's just not something that we start with, right? You're much more likely to look in the mirror and be like, I don't think I have it together today. I don't think that I'm going to make it through this. I don't think I have enough. I don't think this. I don't think that. You're much more likely to tend toward the negative, right? Even if you know that it's the positive. So why is it so difficult to change what I think about me? Why is it so difficult to change what I think about me? So for this part, I want to go back to last week. So if you weren't here, I'm going to give you a quick recap about a specific idea. And that idea, it's a little bit of a scary term, but we're going to unpack it a little bit. It's going to be great. That idea is sin. And so last week we talked about how sin sort of means not up to standard. Sin means not up to standard. And it's important because they use the word sin in the Bible a lot, and we really today only use it in kind of church areas, right? Church, religion kind of spaces. But it was actually a pretty common word back in the Jewish times when it was being used. So sin just meant not up to standard. And it could be not up to your own standards. It could be not up to someone you know's standards, or it could be not up to God's standards. So it was used in multiple circumstances. And it was so common that it was basically like, you missed the mark. That's what it meant. So if you were playing darts and you threw the dart and you didn't hit the bullseye, you missed the mark. You sinned. That was what it meant. It was that common. And that's important because this concept, right, has taken on a little bit more religious overtones in the meantime. But it's helpful for us to think that this was sort of a common phrase that meant you missed the mark, you're not up to standard. And so maybe I just hit my step goal, everybody. Yay. I'm walking around a lot today. I was like, I made it. I didn't miss the mark. I met the goal. This was our definition of sin. Now, what that meant was sometimes we didn't hit the mark, right? So then we might say something like, I sinned. I didn't meet the standard. It became an action. Like I did a thing, I didn't meet the standard. But then, what if we don't meet the standard a few times? Or we don't meet the standard once, but it's about something big. And we let the behavior dictate our identity instead of our identity inform what our behavior is. Then it might come out as, I am a sinner. I will never meet the standard, right? Do we see how this shift can just happen? It could maybe happen without us even knowing it. We subvert our identity to this action that was supposed to be something that meant we didn't meet the standard once. And now it's become an identity that means we don't meet the standard. And maybe this is a little heady, right? Like maybe it feels a little removed. The word sin can kind of feel like only a concept. It's hard to make it real to ourselves. But here's some ideas. For me, maybe I could have said, I'm a thief and I will never be free of shame. Right? I could have really subverted my identity into this one thing that I did. And I know that that happens to people sometimes, that one big decision that was bad makes them feel like they can never kind of get themselves out of whatever that shame cycle is. Or maybe one of these you might relate to more. I'm an awful mom. I will never have a good relationship with my kids. Maybe I'm addicted. I will never be sober. Maybe you can relate to I am unhealthy and I will never reach my goals. Or maybe I am broke and I will never have enough. Maybe these are things that might resonate with you in some way, shape, or form. To be honest, almost all of those in some way, shape, or form have resonated with me at some point in my journey, right? Where I could say, I think I'm thinking this about myself. Does that mean that that second part is true? This is my identity, then this is. And what happens because we live in this sort of sin world, right, is that our God-given identity has been distorted by sin. That identity that says we are marvelous is no longer the one that we go with first, right? We have these other identities that have come in and superseded it. So in the Bible, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lot of hope. And so this is kind of the beginning where we can start to see the story arc, right? Just like Scrooge did, and change and kind of move toward that. So in the Bible, there is 4 accounts of Jesus' life. And one of those accounts was written by a man named John. John met, saw, lived, walked around with Jesus. He was a fisherman, but he wanted to make sure that there was an account of Jesus' life that spoke to people who had a Jewish background, but also to people who didn't. Because, you know, when Jesus came into the world, he opened up the idea of being able to be in God's family to everyone, right? Not just the Jewish people anymore. That was a huge part of what he did. And so he's recounting all the things he thinks might be important for people of all backgrounds. That's one of the things that John really wanted to make primary. And so he's actually, he records this conversation between Jesus and a bunch of, Jewish people who basically were trying to say, you know what, we're good. We don't need your help. We got our people. We're fine. Like, don't worry about us. We can figure out how to meet God's standards all on our own. And Jesus is kind of like, I don't think you can, right? So there's a whole conversation that happens in John chapter 8, and we're just going to read a part of it because I think it will really help us with today's particular piece about why our identities matter. So John writes, Jesus replied to these folks, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. So everyone who sins is a slave of sin. I sinned, you sinned. That means we're all a slave of sin, right? And slavery is not something you just get out of, right? It's not like, oh, here's a door, let me walk through it. There are shackles involved. There is history. There is a mental game. There is a physical space game, right? Like there is a lot to overcome if you're going to get out of a situation of slavery. Even in our own history, right? The situations where people overcame slavery, got out of that particular thing, are the exemplars. They are more rare than people who stayed in that particular place, right? Slavery is difficult to overcome. And the thing with being a slave to sin is that it can start to feel hopeless, right? If you start to have that identity first, then you can start to feel defeated before you even try to figure out who you are in God. And that can be really tough. But, right? There's always a great but. Goes on to say, a slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is a part of the family forever. So if I'm a slave to sin, but I'm not a permanent member of that family, whatever that other family is, there's an opportunity maybe for change. And then this verse also says a son is a permanent member of a family, right? So we start to have this dichotomy where we have slaves and then we have sons and daughters. We have family. The last part says, so if the son sets you free, you are truly free. And remember, this is Jesus talking, and then Jesus talking about himself. If the son, Jesus, sets you free, then you are truly free. So I like this, but it's a little bit theologic-y, right? And so I put it in a picture. So we'll see if you like my picture. So this is my sort of representation of this. So we have this world of sin, right? That's the whole screen here. And we have you and me, who are marvelously made. So we have a little bit of a protective shell of identity that was given to us by God right at the beginning. But we are in this world, right? Like we are in this sort of sin-laden world over here. And God's family is amazing. We want it, we can see it, all that kind of thing. But how do we get from this slavery sort of space into God's family? And John actually earlier in that same book that he wrote says this. He says, but to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. And the he in this is Jesus, right? So that is how the Bible says that we get from that slave status into God's family is through Jesus. Got it? Yes, we're all together? Okay, cool. I like my picture. I hope you like my picture too. It was very helpful to me. All right, so we can move from here to here in God's family, which I think is very hopeful, right? Because it starts a little dark, but at the end of the day, you can change what you think about you. You can change your mindset from I am a slave to I am a son or daughter. You can change that identity from one thing to another thing. And you might be saying, actually thinking a very important question, because this is all great if we understand it, right? But don't we want to walk out of here being able to do it? I know I would want to be able to do the thing. So the key question next is, if you can change, how can you change what you think about you? How can you start to do this? How can you do that? And maybe you're in here and you are just checking out church, or you don't really know if you're a Jesus follower yet, or maybe you've been a Jesus follower a long time and this is good for you. But we really think that this is not necessarily advice that's just for those who are following Jesus. We think it's generally good advice. But here at this church, we think that everyone follows something, right? And that following Jesus is really a way to make your life better and make you better at life. That's kind of what it is. So I hope that you engage with this idea of Jesus through this as a way that no matter where you are, you might be able to figure out how to change how you're thinking about yourself and get out of that slave mentality and into the mentality of a son or daughter mentality. All right? Okay, so having said that, then the question is how. And so this is what the Bible says about how. And this is an interesting how, because did you know that's exactly the same question, the one we're asking right here, that the churches at the time that Jesus had just been alive were asking as well. They were like, okay, so that sounds great. Let's move from slave to son. I like that idea, but how do we do it? And so there was a guy named Paul. He wrote most of the New Testament, and he went around and founded churches, and then he would write to them. He would write to them with advice, answering their questions and things like that. And one of the churches asked exactly this question. They said, okay, so we get it. We know we can do it. We can change from the one to the other, but how? How do we change? So Paul wrote to the church in Ephesus, and he said, this is how. Since you have heard about Jesus and have learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. He goes on to say, instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. Marvelous, wonderful, righteous, holy, right? That's who we are. So when we think about this question, how can you change what you think about you? It's by throwing off that old nature through the power of Jesus. And I always think about like a ghost costume, right? Where your outside is maybe some other identity, being a little sneaky. But when you throw it off, you are revealed as that creation in God, marvelous, wonderful, righteous, holy, etc. How do we do this? How do we change? It's one of those things that is simple but hard. Simple but hard. It is simple to track your food. It's also hard to do it consistently. It is simple to track your finances. It is also hard to do it consistently. So What I'm about to tell you will sound simple, but it is hard, and I understand that, so come along with me. Simply, it is who before do. Who before do. We need to let our who lead our do and not the other way around. Put slightly differently, we need to put our identity before our behavior. Our identity before our behavior. So who we are, we want who we are to drive what we do, not what we do to inform who we are, right? And so how can we do this? I have a fill in the blank of some examples to counter those ones that we were talking about earlier, where we sort of were trying to figure out, who do I want to be? So here's the fill in the blank. I am a blank who does or doesn't do this action, right? But you can see in this that you're putting the who before the do. So to revisit some of our early examples, maybe it is, I am a mom who does fun activities with her kids, right? I'm a mom who does fun activities with her kids. I'm driving the action with identity. I'm a sober person who does the work to stay accountable. That's pretty amazing. Do that. Next one. I am a person who doesn't skip workouts. I don't like. Doesn't skip workouts. I'll be real honest, I definitely skipped a workout this week that I didn't like. It was like wall walks. I just didn't want to do it. But here's the thing. My identity is as a person who doesn't skip workouts, right? And so what that did for me was it took that sin, right? That idea that I didn't meet my own standard of what I want to do in my workout, and it put it back into just being an action where I missed the mark, but I could try again. It didn't reform into an identity where I am someone who can never reach the mark and therefore will never meet my goals. So by having my who, that I'm a person who doesn't skip workouts, before my do, skip that one workout, it rejiggers how I'm thinking about myself and how I think about myself in light of that one action, right? That maybe didn't meet my own standard, where I sinned against myself. And then maybe there's the last one here. I am a hard worker who puts God first in my finances. I'm a hard worker who puts God first in my finances. So maybe these examples you could relate with, or maybe you could fill in your own set of blanks, right? I am a blank who does or doesn't do this. And what you want is for that who to be aligned with who God has called you to be. If you are looking at that who and it has no elements of truth, righteousness, wonderfulness, or marvelousness in it, then it is probably not the identity that God gave you, right? And you should rethink that, because you want that to be informing what you do. Because I do what I do because of what I think of me. I do what I do because of what I think of me. One place for me that this happened is I became a Christian, and I thought it was important to, or a follower of Jesus, and I thought it was important to contribute to the work of the church. And so one way, once I kind of had my life together and my jobs and all that, is I automated my giving, because I decided that I wanted to be, my who. I wanted to be a financially responsible person who put God first in her finances. And I was like, I think the best way for me to do this is to automate my giving and go ahead and do that. And maybe this is the stage where you're at. That was great. That was really important for me to do and stay consistent and not mess with it, right? Like to plan that into my budgeting and my finance. It was a huge checkbox, but something I had to work with. Well, recently, God's been like, you know what? You can be a financially responsible person who does this, but also like I have some next steps for you, right? I want to inform more of your behaviors. And so recently, I've been working on being a financially responsible person who honors God with their finances at Costco and at Target and on Amazon and all of these other places where maybe I have the money, but is that thing that I want aligned with what God and I have decided are my goals? This past year I bought a house, and it's expensive, right? And so thinking about, do I really need a trip to Home Goods today? I want it, but do I really need it? And figuring out, how do I honor God in some of these smaller things, and not just like saying, okay, that checkbox has made me, good for life, right? Like it can be an ongoing iterative conversation. So one of my, that is one area, but there are other areas too. Whenever I'm up here, I'm always kind of like, do I have it all together enough to say this stuff? But God has always been really great with saying, you know what, you don't have to have it together. Being in the process as the person who's talking is really powerful. So there are absolutely things that I am still working on, right? Like I am a Christian who loves the Bible and could read it more, right? And doesn't read it enough. And so that's something, if I want to like see what's going on with that identity, I am someone who believes in the power of prayer and And if that is the identity I want to work on right now, I need to, and sets aside time, right, to pray every day. These are things that we can work on, even if, we're not there right now, and they're God-given identities. And so how do we do this? And my hack is actually just to kind of reframe this, and I try to let whose I am inform who I am. I try to let whose I am inform whom I am. So I personally have decided, right, to follow Jesus, and I have moved because of that from being a slave over here into the family of God. And that means that I by decision, changed owners to be in God's family, right? And so I try to let whose I am, God's, inform who I am. And so for me, that's something that's real important. And I think in the Bible, this is another question they had back in the day. And so Paul also addressed this, because how do you do that? How do you let whose you are inform who you are? Paul said to the church in Rome, let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. You do what you do because of what you think about you. If you let God transform the way that you think, then you'll let him transform the way that you think about you, right? And so for me, I try to let all of my identities flow from this statement about someone like me. What does a child of God, someone like me, do in a situation like this? What does a child of God do in a situation like this? Because if I start with whose I am, and I know that that informs who I am as a child of God, and then I let the rest of my identities and decisions flow from there, I have changed the way I think about me, which means now I have the power to change what I do in a situation like that, right? Have it come from there. Because you do what you do because of what you think of you. You do what you do because of what you think of you. And I want you to think of yourself as marvelous, and then let everything else flow from there. So I am excited that today we covered the second key question of what gives us the power to change. Last week, we talked about having the right why. This week, we talked about how to settle into the right who. And so I hope you stay with us on the journey of figuring out how to have the power to change next week with part 3. Let me pray for you. Lord God, thank you so much for the opportunity to gather together and learn more about who you want us to be. God, you say that we are beautifully and wonderfully made, that you know the plans that you have for us, and that you are just setting the stage for those plans to come to fruition. So God, we just thank you for the opportunity that you have given us through your Son, Jesus Christ, to move from being a slave to the world to being a son or daughter in the family of God. And I pray this week, Lord, that you would help us to pause and notice in those situations where we are actually making a decision to do something, who we are. Who are we saying to ourselves our identity is? And that we remember whose we are, and that as children of God, we make decisions about who we want to be, who we want to become, and how that person acts from that place. God, we love you and we thank you. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. And before you go, I would love for you to consider engaging with local church in 3 additional ways. The first is to fill out a Connect card. No matter where you are in the world, we would love for you to do this. It'll only take you about 30 seconds, and it's just an easy way for us to get to know you a bit more and to serve you better, and for you to get to know us a little better as well. Just click the link in the description to get started. The second way that you can engage with local church is by visiting us in person. If you're local and you don't regularly participate in a church community, we would love to invite you to join us every Sunday. Resources like this can do a lot for our faith personally, but Jesus teaches that God does something unique for our faith when we choose to gather corporately. Click the link in the description to plan your visit. And finally, if you've been positively impacted by local church in any way, would you consider making a tax-deductible donation? Content like this, along with everything that goes on around here, is only made possible by the generosity of people just like you. You can click the link in the description or visit localchurchli.com/give. So, once again, thank you so much. We hope that you found this content helpful and inspiring, and we're so honored to be a part of your faith journey.